Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Yusuf and welcome back to the Hydra series. This is part 2, and we're going to start with a little confession about something I said in part 1. Those of you who've watched it will recall that I jokingly said that no one ever needed to read the manuals. No, that's not completely true in fact. It turns out that I made a mistake. There is a piece in the Hydra kit, the turret ring and a couple of fuel tanks, that needs to go into the hull along with the rest of it before you put the second drive unit on. Found that out after the fact. Luckily, I was able to pop it in without too much work. Anyhow, moving on. First item of today is an introduction to this green stuff. This is very, very handy. It's a two-part epoxy putty the workshop actually used to sculpt their original miniatures, and that in this case we're going to use to patch up this gap here. You can see where the armor plates haven't quite met, so we're going to go in and patch that up rather than have a gap in the model. So it's sold as a ribbon. You can see here we've got 1 part blue to about 2 parts yellow. We're going to put a little horizontal band across that with a sculpting tool. Just take off that, and then we're basically going to fold this over and start working it until it turns, well, green. What this does is start a chemical reaction within the putty that will harden it eventually to a substance with roughly the consistency of rock. It also, incidentally, is somewhat adhesive. It's not too far removed chemically from those 2-part epoxy glues that are used in DIY jobs. So as you might imagine, it will stick to just about anything. Luckily it's not full-blown super glue adhesive, but near enough. So there we go, that's got us green stuff. Now, roll it out into a sausage shape. We've all done this with plasticine and Play-Doh as small children, you all know the drill. There we go, so we now have a nice little thin sausage, and we just want to put that along the cracks, roll it down, and generally work it in to the gap. So like so, like so. Obviously there's quite a lot of excess at this point, and that will look even worse on the model than a gap that we might possibly have been able to camouflage off, even if anyone had looked. So with that popped in, we now need to take off the excess. So first things first, we need a bit of water, and we need a sculpting tool. Dampen the tool. The water's got 2 functions here. First off, it helps give us a smooth finish on the putty, and second off, it ensures that the putty stays stuck to the model and doesn't come off the tool, I hope. So flat to the model, just gently scrape along, just taking off the excess and leaving it flush. Also remember what I said, this stuff will stick to anything, so gently tease this away, go in again, take off the excess. As you can see, we have neatly filled that first chunk of gap. It now looks more or less like a bad welding seam, which kind of fits the Imperial Guard. These aren't adept as Astartes after all, they're not going to get the best and the brightest of all the gear. So, continue onwards, keeps rolling another sausage of the putty. So, with that done, we can move on to the next step of the assembly, which in this case is actually broken up into several parts, because Workshop in their manual advise that you assemble the whole model piece by piece by piece by piece by piece and then start building it. We're not going to do that, because it's, if for example I put the upper armor plate onto the model, which fits in like so, you can see here that some of the finer detail on the fuel tank is now going to be an absolute pain to get to and paint. So that goes off, and here we've got upper armour plate, smoke launchers and driver's hatch, so that will go to one side. We'll paint that separately, or at least do the basic paint coat separately, and we can now get a paintbrush into the fuel tank much more easily to take care of the fine detail. So we'll do the basic paint job, then do the final assembly on the model, and then we'll do the weathering later on just to tie the whole model together. However, that does mean we have to do the other parts of the assembly. So, first things first, we have got, if memory serves and I consult the manual, the turret ring. Now, base component is the turret floor itself. That just pops in. That's freely rotating, so it doesn't get glued. Put the hole to one side. On top of that, we have got the two main supports for the flat cannons as well as their detailing. Now, mounting plate for the flat cannon. Turn that over and there is a cross locator here that ties into a cross-shaped dent here. Handily, Workshop have made it so that one axis of the cross is longer than the other, so you can't get this the wrong way around. Well, you can, but you'd really have to be trying. So we break out the poly cement. Incidentally, I've done the cleanup for these off screen just to save some time. Pop it over, tiny bit of glue into the hole. There we go. Gluey hole, and then this lines up, pops into place. Just hold it for a second while the weld starts, and that is not joined. Let's try that again. Hold it into place while the weld starts. There we are. And put that to one side to dry. Rinse and repeat with the other one. And gravity is not claiming that, so pop it to one side. The other piece is the little manual control wheel, one of the fiddlier bits of detail on this model. Little tip with parts like these, don't take them off the sprue until you are absolutely ready to clean them up and put them into place. I'm disregarding my own advice here because I wanted everything off the sprue and ready to go on the camera. And as a consequence, I actually dropped one of these onto the floor during the prep work and almost lost the blasted thing, which would have been embarrassing. Anyhow, there is a tiny locator hole here that corresponds to a tab here. So, dabby glue. Yoink. Again, much less than you'd think you need. And push that home. Just release. So, that is one side of the cannon assembly into place. Put that to dry, pull off the other one, and rinse and repeat. Next stop, the guns, or at least half of them. So, 2 gun barrels, 1 gun housing in 2 halves, and 2 ammunition drums. Now, the way these work is that Workshop have put in what amount to locator tabs here in each of the housings, and there's corresponding tabs on the other side. Those tabs line up with markers on either side of the barrel. So what you can't do, unfortunately, is pull together the housing, glue that up, and then push the barrel in when you want to switch between a Hydra and a Wyvern, because it will not work. does not want to know at all. You could perhaps modify it to work, but since the base of the gun is actually wider than the mouth of the cannon housing, it would require some very considerable work to make it fit. You'd have to narrow this right down, and it would probably end up looking just a little bit scrappy. Fortunately, I just want a Hydra from this kit, so we are good for the moment. As always, check your fit. Standard protocol. Double check that everything is going to line up. It's not going to need an excessive amount of green stuff. In fact, I don't think it's going to need any on this one. So we're pretty much okay. Pull it apart again. Pop it down and glue time. So this is going to be a little bit awkward. We will get some glue onto that tab and just put it into place. Check it's in place. If it is, we can't rotate it, which is as it should be. Likewise the other one. Dabby dabby glue and lock, and again no rotation. Then we need to get the housing into place, so figure out our locator points. We have got the opposite side of each gun barrel. Dab and dab. We can then put a narrow trail along the outer casing. Very, very sparing, as much as possible at least. And then gently along the baseline here. Minimum pressure, just let gravity draw the glue down. Don't push nearly as hard as you might want to. The last thing you want is poly cement everywhere. So with that done, this should flick and just drop neatly into place and push home. Double check the gun's positioning. We have got a limited time frame to adjust this, so we'll just get that a little bit proud, and there we go. So that's in play, and double check that we've not got any excess poly cement, which we have a bit of. Overdid the glue slightly at the back. We'll just take that out with a metal tool so we don't have plastic all over the place. Like so. And the final touch is just to put the ammunition drums onto their mounting points here and here. So, dabby dabby glue once, dabby dabby glue twice. Position once and position twice, so that's nicely secure. And we have two Hydra autocannon assembled, ready to go on the mountings and ready to smite the enemies of the Emperor. The other side, of course, I will do off camera just to save some time. Now, hopefully the gun assemblies have welded and set, so these can now go into place. Mounting holes on either side. We want the spokes pointing outwards to serve as mounts for the guns. Test the fit as always. Check that's okay, which it is, or at least appears to be. Pull it out. Now most of the strain is going to go through this rear hole here and the corresponding locator tab. So that's where most of the glue is going to go. Dabby dabby glue. And onto this side. Dabby dabby, very small dabby glue, and there. And just position, meet, and slot home. So that's one. Rinse and repeat for the other side. Dabby dabby glue, dabby dabby glue, dabby dabby glue. Maybe a bit of overkill there, but we'll find out in a second. Locate, align, and home. and then realised that actually this mounting wheel hadn't properly set. Annoyances, annoyances, annoyances. Okay, so we now have our basic turret assembly, the main hull, forward armour plate, turret ring, and cannons. These bits are all going to be done separately. There is one final addition to the main hull, however, and that is the rear working platform. This just pops onto the back like so, and simply needs some glue along the back to keep it in place. So as always, gentle with the glue, less than you think you need. If you see it beading like this, by the way, you've used too much, so we'll just quick that off quickly and then push this into place like so. Okay, there we go. So that's done most of the assembly work. We've still got to do the crew, who are going to be complex and are likely going to have to be painted separately, and the forward shield also has to be done, so we'll quickly tidy this into place. It's actually quite a quick assembly, there's only 4 parts to it. Unfortunately, one of them is this tiny little lever here, which just pops onto the forward control panel. So we'll solve that first. As always, check the fit, make sure it aligns, which it doesn't, not really, but there's not a lot we can do about that. There's no locator tab, there's no real mounting for it. I don't even know if you can see it properly on the footage at the moment. So, tiniest dab of glue, just the barest hint of a suggestion of adhesive, and then we will gently, like so, push that into line. Plastic kicks in and welds almost immediately, so that's not too bad at all, but we'll need to leave it vertical for a bit while it properly sets. On the front side we have the sensor cluster for the Hydra, so that can simply get a quick couple of dabs at the top. There we go, and then a quick smidgen across the base. Just go easy on the glue as always, particularly when you've got a large flat area to join like this. It will be very easy to go overkill on that, and gently push the whole thing into place. So that's added the forward detail. No significant, in fact no seepage of poly cement whatsoever, and once that has set we can just flip it over, bring the display back into place and glue onto the rear here just so it pops into line like so, and the gunner actually has something to look at. As always, test the fit. If you remember, I've forgotten a few times even in this video, but then I did check quite a lot of this during the prep work, so pull it out, tiny amounts of glue, dabby, and home. Again, this is something that if it was done post fully assembled and that you attempted to post paint it after the fact, would be extremely awkward to get to between the crew standing in front of it and the turret ring underneath. You would be having a devil of a time painting the finer detail on the control panel. So that's another assembly that we'll leave separate for today. Likewise the tracks, because they are going to get a slightly different paint job to the rest, and the crew are their own little problem. So we're going to leave it there for today. That has been the cannon, turret and main assemblies, a quick look at one of the uses of green stuff, and until next time, purge the Emperor's enemies, ladies and gentlemen, especially the ones in aircraft.